The federal government will shut down tonight. Good evening, Jim Shutdown here, sitting in for Anderson. That is the bottom line. After days of wrangling over the president's border wall and a week of turmoil surrounding this president, not to mention the worst week on Wall Street in a decade, tonight's deadline will come and go without funding to keep the lights on. That means offices and agencies will close. 25% of your government will go unfunded. 380,000 people will be put on furlough. 420,000 people doing essential jobs, including about 55,000 at the TSA. They'll stay at work, but they won't get paid. There's a lot of folks who will not be getting any paychecks over the holidays. And just last week, the president said if a shutdown happens, blame him.
And I'll tell you what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down. And I'm going to shut it down for border security. But we believe you.
Well, imagine that. Today, the president changed his tune, starting with a tweet this morning, also later during a press availability. This, he said, would be a Democratic shutdown. Yet even as he tried today to avoid accountability, shift the blame, it's now his job, along with lawmakers in both parties, to clean up the mess, which we are now learning won't be happening tonight. CNN's Phil Mattingly joins us now with more on the Capitol. Phil, despite the efforts, last-minute meetings, shuttle diplomacy back and forth on the Hill, a shutdown's guaranteed.
Yeah, exactly. The House is adjourned for the night. The Senate has told senators that there will be no votes tonight. The actual top leaders in both the House and Senate have already gone home. The reality is, if there is a deal to be had, that deal will not be reached tonight, and there will be no votes tonight. That means a shutdown will start. The question now is not whether or not there will be a shutdown. There will be. The question is there a deal that could be made over the course of the next day, 2 days, or 3 days? And here's the reality of where things stand right now. Jim, as you noted, for days on end, there appeared to be no movement whatsoever. The president making very clear his top line was $5 billion to fund a border wall. Democrats making very clear they weren't willing to go anywhere near that. And Democrats also making very clear they thought they held the upper hand in these negotiations. What we do know over the course of the last couple of hours, through that flurry of negotiations, the vice president, the incoming chief of staff, Jared Kushner, coming up to Capitol Hill, shuttling back and forth, is that there is some sign that the White House is willing to deal. The question is what that deal will be. Now, as it currently stands, Mick Mulvaney, the vice president, and Jared Kushner are actually still in the Capitol, even though the leaders are gone. The question is, what are they willing to move their number to? When you talk to Democrats, they've made very clear. They have put a bipartisan option on the table. That would be a 6-week stopgap bill that the Senate passed unanimously. The House has obviously, up to this point, rejected that option. So where are there potential areas of agreement? What has been batted around over the course of the last couple hours is perhaps moving back to what was the Senate agreed upon in a bipartisan manner, number of $1.6 billion for border security, with the addition of some other fund for immigration-related issues that the administration will have access to. That sounds familiar. It's because it was rejected earlier in the week by Democrats. So where this all ends, nobody really knows. What they do know is there will be a shutdown on midnight, and talks to try and find some way out of this will continue.
We heard senators on the floor the last time they spoke saying, listen, we're not going to come back unless there's something that all the sides are willing really to back here. So that next vote won't happen, presumably, until that point. Do we have any idea then when the next vote might happen? It sounds like no.
Yeah, we don't, not at this point. But I will say that's tangible movement. The idea that the show votes or the procedural votes or people just putting up bills and having messaging votes, that's in the past now. That was the agreement that was reached tonight. No, there wasn't an agreement reached on policy grounds. There wasn't an agreement reached to get out of the shutdown, but there was an agreement reached that the next time the United States Senate holds a vote, it will be on an agreement. When that agreement actually comes together, when that vote takes place, that remains TBD. People I'm talking to that are involved in the negotiations caution that there's a lot to go on, or there's a lot that needs to happen in the hours and days ahead, and there's a lot of movement that needs to happen from the president's baseline and from Democrats' baseline for anything to occur. So right now, everybody is in wait-and-see time, and the reality is, Jim, we're not going to hear anything, I'm told, until at least tomorrow at this point.
800,000 Americans not going to be getting paid through the holidays. Phil Mattingly, thanks very much. Let's get more now on how this is unfolding at the White House. Jim Acosta, you've been there. You've been following this. There's talk of compromise from the White House. Do you have any idea of what that looks like, what they're willing to give on?
Well, we saw the president earlier tonight put out that tweet. He's not even demanding a wall at this point. He'll take a fence made up of steel slats. After all those months of campaigning and saying that Mexico would pay for a wall, he's now willing to give all of that up for steel slats at the border. But putting that aside, we did run into the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, over here at the White House earlier this evening, who said he thought there was a chance that there could be a deal before midnight. I also talked to a senior administration official just in the last few moments who said it is not quite midnight. So there is the potential that they could strike some kind of an agreement. But as Phil Mattingly was just saying a few moments ago, the mechanics are not really in place. There aren't members of Congress in place up on Capitol Hill in the House and the Senate to vote and approve some kind of compromise. But whether or not we get some kind of agreement before the clock strikes midnight or perhaps thereafter, somewhere thereafter, I suppose you could have a technical shutdown, but maybe an agreement in place before we wake up tomorrow morning. That is just, I think, the best case scenario at this point. I think the president has indicated, and I've talked to sources over here this evening, and they're indicating the president is also willing to dig in on this fight over border security. He wants some kind of consolation out of all of this, and at this point, he hasn't seen one yet.
Yeah, well, that's the way the president views it, right? He wants a win in every context, a win that reflects on him positively.
That's right.
Jim Acosta, thanks very much at the White House.
Yep, you bet.
Connecticut Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal today had a tweet that speaks to the shutdown, but also the perceptions of larger troubles happening now at the White House. I'm quoting now, presidential freefall, riding Amtrak back to the Senate vote. The only firm tracks seem to be the ones under the train. Bipartisan leadership must restore rational governing, abandoned by an impetuous, petulant chief executive. Joining us now, one of Senator Richard Blumenthal's distinguished colleagues, former Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders, independent, of course, from the state of Vermont. Senator Sanders, thanks for taking the time tonight.
My pleasure.
You've certainly heard the president. You've certainly heard Republican leaders say tonight that this budget crisis is now on everyone's shoulders, owned by Republicans, Democrats, the president. I imagine you disagree with that. Who do you believe bears responsibility?
Well, you just had it right on your program a few moments ago where the president said, I take responsibility for the shutdown. You got the Republicans running the Senate, Republicans running the House. President says he wants a shutdown. I think the American people are clear about who caused the shutdown. The one point that your very comprehensive analysis of where we are missed is that 2 days ago, seems like 2 years ago, but 2 days ago, unanimously, the United States Senate reached an agreement to make sure the government did not shut down and extend the process into February. And then what happened is, unfortunately, President Trump watched television. He saw something on Fox TV, heard something from Rush Limbaugh, and he changed his mind. And sadly, really sadly, the entire Republican congressional caucus in the House and the Senate kind of caved in to him. And it is a heck of a way to run a government when you have a president who sees something on television, tweets out his view, and you have both the Republican bodies in the House and the Senate cave into that.
So the figure, of course, in that measure that was passed unanimously, as you said, the Senate was $1.6 billion. Tonight, from the Democrats' perspective, are you or other Democrats willing to give any ground on that figure, go any higher?
Look, I think that the wall is an absurd idea. I think it's a waste of money. I think it just fans Trump's illusions. And no, I'm not going to support $5 billion or money for a wall. Everybody, and I think Trump lies on this as well as lying on almost everything else. He lies when he suggests that Democrats or progressives are not concerned about border security. Of course we are. Everybody is concerned about border security. But if you want to do border security intelligently and cost effectively, you don't do it with a wall. There are much better approaches than that.
I'm sure you saw the president's tweet tonight going after this slats model, not a wall. He called it a steel slat barrier. Here's the picture there. Looks almost medieval with the pikes on the top there. Does that make any difference to you or other Democrats
No.
to not have a wall, to have a fence in effect?
Jim, we have a infrastructure in this country, our roads, our bridges, our water systems, which are crumbling. We have veterans who are sleeping out on the street right now. We have kids who cannot afford to go to college. We have a lot of needs in this country, and spending $5 billion on a wall is not, to me, one of our priorities. And we've got to get our priorities right and take care of working families in this country and not just Trump's illusions.
What do you say to the folks who say that Democrats, really they sense the president being weak here? He's about to lose one chamber of Congress to Democrats, knows the time is waning, but the Democrats see an opportunity simply to stick it to the president here.
No, I don't think it's a question of sticking it to him. It's a question of spending taxpayers' money in an intelligent way, in a rational way.